In December 1948, an unidentified body was discovered on Somerton Beach in Adelaide, Australia. The deceased was a man who was impeccably dressed in a well-tailored suit, complete with polished shoes, presenting a neat and meticulous appearance. His body was found with his head resting against a wall in a slumped position. Initial speculations by the authorities suggested that the cause of death could have been heart failure or, more plausibly, poisoning. However, despite these suspicions, the subsequent autopsy did not reveal any traces of poison in his system, leaving the true cause of his demise a mystery. There wasn't a wallet or any form of identification on the man, and all the tags from his clothing had been meticulously cut out. The authorities took his fingerprints, hoping for a lead, but these too were unidentifiable in any records. In a further effort to identify him, they published a photograph of the body in the newspapers, yet even then no one came forward to recognize or claim the man. 4 months after the discovery of the body, detectives made a startling find: a hidden pocket sewn into the inside of his trousers. Within this secret pocket was a rolled-up piece of paper from a rare book called the Rubaiyat. This piece of paper bore the words Tamam Shud, which translates to "it has ended." Despite months of exhaustive searching to find the exact book from which this paper came, authorities were unsuccessful. Eventually, they decided to bury the unidentified man, often referred to as the Somerton Man. However, before doing so, they took a cast of his bust and embalmed his body to preserve it, hoping that one day his identity might be revealed. 8 months later, a man walked into the police station with a peculiar story. He claimed that shortly after the body was discovered, he had found a copy of the Rubaiyat in the backseat of his car, which he regularly parked near Somerton Beach. Initially, he thought nothing of this finding. However, after reading about the ongoing search related to the mysterious Somerton man in a newspaper article, he remembered the book. Upon inspection, it became clear that a part of the final page had been torn out, and this torn piece matched the fragment of paper found in the Somerton man's hidden pocket. Additionally, inside the book, the man had discovered a phone number and some sort of enigmatic code. This discovery added yet another layer of intrigue to the baffling case. The phone number led the authorities to a woman named Jessica Thompson, who resided nearby. During her interview, Jessica was notably evasive, and her behavior turned even more dramatic when she saw the bust of the Somerton man. She claimed she was about to faint, but she steadfastly denied knowing him. Despite her denial, she did mention that she had sold a copy of the Rubaiyat to a man named Alfred Boxall. This lead, however, soon turned into a dead end, as Alfred Boxall was found to be very much alive and still in possession of the copy of the Rubaiyat that Jessica had sold to him. The mysterious code found in the book added another layer of complexity to the case. Unfortunately, the code proved to be unhelpful, as it has defied all attempts to crack it. To this day, the code remains an unsolved enigma, adding to the enduring mystery of the Somerton man. Our next strange case, on January 15, 1947, the remains of 22-year-old Elizabeth Short, famously known as the Black Dahlia, were discovered on the 3800 block of South Norton Avenue in Los Angeles. The gruesome nature of the scene was shocking. Her body had been severed in half, and her skin was so pale and devoid of blood that the woman who initially found her mistook the body for a mannequin. The precision of the cuts suggested surgical expertise, as there was no damage to her internal organs or bones. Adding to the macabre scene, her face had been slashed from the corners of her mouth to her ears, creating a ghastly permanent smile. Notably, there was no blood on the ground at the scene, leading investigators to believe that she had been killed elsewhere, and her body was transported to the location where it was found. 9 days after Elizabeth Short's body was discovered, an envelope was sent to the Examiner, addressed with individual letters cut and pasted from magazines and newspapers. The message read, "The Los Angeles Examiner and other Los Angeles papers. Here is Dahlia's belongings. Letter to follow." True to its word, the envelope contained a disturbing assortment of items. Short's social security card, birth certificate, photographs, pieces of paper with names written on them, and an address book with several pages missing bearing the name Mark Hansen embossed on the cover. To further complicate matters for the investigators, gasoline had been used to meticulously clean these objects, effectively removing any fingerprints and hindering efforts to trace them back to the sender. On March 14th, a self-death note scrawled in pencil on a scrap of paper was discovered tucked inside a shoe amidst a pile of men's clothing by the ocean's edge at the foot of Breeze Avenue in Venice. The note read, quote, "To whom it may concern. I have waited for the police to capture me for the Black Dahlia killing, but they have not. I am too much of a coward to turn myself in, so this is the best way out for me." End quote. The clothing was first noticed by a beach caretaker who promptly reported the find to the lifeguard captain, John Dillon. Dillon then immediately notified the West Los Angeles police station. The pile of clothing included a coat and trousers made of blue herringbone tweed, brown and white shirt, white jockey shorts, tan socks, and tan moccasin shoes, approximately size 8. Despite the detailed description and careful examination, the clothes provided no clues regarding the identity of their owner, leaving yet another aspect of the case shrouded in mystery. Although numerous suspects were named and investigated, the authorities were never able to definitively identify the killer of the Black Dahlia. Despite extensive efforts and various leads over the years, the mystery of Elizabeth Short's murder has remained unsolved for over 70 years. Continuing to baffle investigators and the public alike. On December 26, 1996, in Boulder, Colorado, Patsy Ramsey reported discovering a ransom note for her 6-year-old daughter, JonBenet Ramsey, on the back staircase inside the Ramsey home. This alarming discovery led her to call the police at 5:52 a.m. to report JonBenet as missing. At the time, the only individuals present in the house were JonBenet's father, John Ramsey, her mother, Patsy, and her brother, Burke. Oddly enough, JonBenet's body was discovered inside the home in the utility room in the basement less than 8 hours later. Her father, John Ramsey, found her body, which had duct tape across her mouth and a smooth cord around her neck. When the police arrived, they suspected that the crime scene had been heavily compromised due to the presence of multiple people who had arrived at the scene. The police also claimed that they had not searched the house after Patsy's initial call because there was no reason to believe that JonBenet was still inside the home. At the time of her death, JonBenet Ramsey was a well-known child beauty queen superstar, having won at least 5 high-end child beauty competitions. Her death was ultimately ruled a homicide. The autopsy report stated that JonBenet's official cause of death was asphyxia by strangulation associated with craniocerebral trauma. Due to JonBenet's beauty queen fame and her mother Patsy Ramsey being a former beauty queen herself, the case attracted nationwide attention and intense media interest. Despite extensive investigations, the crime remains unsolved to this day and continues to be an open investigation with the Boulder Police Department. On September 29, 1982, 7 people in the Chicago area ingested poisoned Tylenol pills, leading to their collapse and death shortly after. The victims were 12-year-old Mary Kellerman, 27-year-old Mary Reiner, 31-year-old Mary McFarland, 35-year-old Paula Prince, 27-year-old Adam Janus, 25-year-old Stanley Janus, and 19-year-old Teresa Janus. Adam Janus took a Tylenol and died at the hospital. Tragically, when his family gathered to mourn, his brother Stanley Janus and Stanley's wife, Teresa, also took Tylenol and died, resulting in 3 deaths within the same family on the same day. This series of events prompted investigators to connect the dots, leading to the realization that the Tylenol capsules had been tampered with and were the cause of the deaths. Cook County investigator Nick Pichos compared the Janus family's Tylenol bottle to that of Mary Kellerman and noticed a critical similarity. Both bottles bore the control number MC2880. Deputy Medical Examiner Edmund Donahue then asked Pichos to smell the bottles, to which Pichos responded that they both smelled like almonds. This was a significant clue because the poison cyanide is known to emit a bitter almond odor. In large quantities, cyanide can cause seizures, cardiac arrest, and respiratory failure. Subsequent blood tests on all the victims revealed that they had ingested doses of cyanide ranging from 100 to 1,000 times the lethal amount, confirming cyanide poisoning as the cause of death. Donahue spoke to an attorney from Johnson & Johnson, Tylenol's parent company, and after all the victims were buried on October 1, 1982, it was confirmed that the Tylenol bottles had been intentionally poisoned with potassium cyanide. In response, the manufacturer took immediate action, recalling over 31 million bottles of Tylenol and issuing warnings to the public. They also offered to replace the recalled bottles with new, safe ones and announced a $100,000 reward for any information leading to the capture of the perpetrator. These extensive precautions and measures cost the company over $100 million, but they were necessary to ensure public safety and restore trust in their product. Following the initial incident, there were several more copycat deaths across the United States, which further heightened public fear and concern. This spate of tragedies spurred the pharmaceutical industry to implement significant safety measures, leading to the invention of the safety seals, now commonly found on medicine bottles to prevent tampering. Despite extensive investigations, no suspect has ever been charged or convicted for the original poisonings, and the case remains unsolved to this day. On the night before Christmas in 1945 in Fayetteville, West Virginia, George and Jenny Sauter were asleep with 9 of their children when a fire started in the house around 1 in the morning. George, Jenny, and 4 of their children managed to escape. The remaining children, 14-year-old Maurice, 12-year-old Martha, 9-year-old Louis, 8-year-old Jenny, and 5-year-old Betty, still remained in the house. Between the 5 of them, they shared 2 bedrooms located upstairs. George broke back into the house to save the rest of the children, but the staircase was on fire. When he went outside to retrieve his ladder, it was missing from its normal spot. Plus, both of his coal trucks, which he was going to use to stand on top of, were strangely not starting. Marion, one of the children who escaped the fire, ran to a neighbor's house to phone the fire department, but the operator didn't pick up. When another neighbor called, the operator failed to pick up the phone again. That same neighbor actually drove to town and found the fire chief in person, F.J. Morris, and told him about the fire. However, even though the fire station was located a mere 2.5 miles away from the house, firefighters didn't reach the Sauter home until 8 a.m., 7 hours after the fire began. When they got there, the house was literally burnt to ash. Authorities sifted through the ash to try and find the remains of the missing 5 children, but nothing was found, and they were presumed dead due to the fire. Morris suggested that the fire was so hot that it literally cremated the children's bodies, including their bones. While that theory sounds reasonable, it's not entirely accurate, because even when flesh is burned away, bones are typically left behind. Additionally, there was no smell of burning flesh reported during or after the fire. The cause of the fire was deemed to be bad wiring, and the 5 missing children were issued death certificates. Soon after the fire, George and Jenny began to suspect that their children were not dead, but instead kidnapped, and the fire was deliberately set as a diversion. In fact, George had the wiring checked earlier that fall by the power company, which had deemed the wiring in safe working order. While the fire was in progress, a woman came forward and said she saw all of the 5 missing children peering from a passing car. Another woman who was staying at a Charleston hotel had seen the children's photos in a newspaper and said she had seen 4 of the 5 a week after the fire. The children were accompanied by 2 women and 2 men, all of the Italian extraction, she said in a statement. I tried to talk to the children in a friendly manner, but the men appeared hostile and wouldn't allow it. From the 1950s until Jenny Sauter's death in the late 1980s, the Sauter family maintained a billboard on State Route 16 with pictures of the 5 vanished children and offering a reward for information. The last known surviving Sauter child, Sylvia, still doesn't believe her siblings perished in the fire. To this day, they have never been found, and the mystery is still ongoing. Starting in 1918 and continuing over a period of 18 months, the city of New Orleans was terrorized by a serial killer who became infamously known as the Axeman. This sinister figure was the very embodiment of the bogeyman, launching his attacks exclusively at night. He was rumored to be responsible for 12 attacks and 6 deaths, casting a long shadow of fear over the city. Adding to the eerie nature of his crimes, the Axeman targeted his victims while they were asleep, making his assaults even more terrifying. Strangely, he never brought his own weapons. Instead, he utilized tools he found within the victims' homes, typically an axe, which he would then leave at the scene of the crime. This chilling modus operandi contributed to the enduring mystery and fear surrounding the Axeman's identity and motives. The majority of the Axeman's victims were Italian immigrants, or Italian Americans, which led many citizens of New Orleans to believe that the crimes were ethnically motivated. This aspect of the crimes stirred significant public concern and media frenzy. Numerous media outlets speculated wildly, suggesting mafia involvement despite the complete lack of evidence to support such claims. This focus on the victim's ethnicity further heightened the tension and fear in the community, adding another layer of complexity to the already chilling mystery of the Axeman's identity and motives. Other crime analysts have suggested that the Axeman killings were sexually motivated, proposing that the murderer might have been a sadist, specifically targeting female victims. This theory is supported by instances where male victims were killed only when they attempted to protect or block the attacker's access to women. In several cases, the woman of the household was murdered while the man was spared, further supporting this hypothesis. Another, less likely theory is that the Axeman committed the murders to promote jazz music. This theory stems from a letter purportedly written by the killer, in which he claimed he would spare the lives of those who played jazz in their homes on a particular night. Despite these various theories, the Axeman was never identified, and the murders remain unsolved, leaving the true motives and identity of the killer a lingering mystery. On February 25, 1957, the body of an unidentified boy was discovered in a box in an illegal dumping ground near Philadelphia. The boy was estimated to be between 4 and 6 years old, weighing approximately 30 pounds and standing about 3 foot tall. He was found naked, but wrapped in a blanket, and his hair had been recently cut. The body was discovered by a young man who was walking through the abandoned lot. Strangely, this man waited an entire day before contacting the police. Additionally, a second man had previously found the boy's body, but chose not to report it because he did not want to get involved. Due to the cold weather and the delayed phone call, the police were unable to accurately estimate the time of the boy's death, complicating the investigation further. In an effort to identify the boy, his body was kept in the morgue while visitors from 10 different states examined him for identifiable marks, but to no avail. The police distributed 400,000 flyers featuring the boy's image to police stations, post offices, and courthouses nationwide. The American Medical Association also disseminated a description of the boy, but this led nowhere. Authorities compared the boy's footprints to those in hospital records in the area and even took his fingerprints, but no records indicated that the boy had ever existed. Despite these exhaustive efforts, the identity of the boy remains unknown. In 2016, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children released a forensic facial reconstruction of the victim and added him into their database. Unfortunately, the boy has never been identified, and the case still remains open to this day. In early 1935, the Coogee Aquarium and swimming baths in Sydney, Australia, were struggling to stay afloat amidst the Great Depression. The aquarium's owner, Bert Hobson, desperately needed an attraction to draw in customers. His hopes were revived when he and his son caught a 14-foot, 1-ton tiger shark off the coast and decided to put it in their pool. Given the numerous shark attacks that had occurred in the area, Hobson believed that displaying this formidable predator would be the perfect way to save his business and captivate the public's interest. About a week after catching the shark and in front of crowds of families, the shark began to convulse and vomit, eventually spitting up a rat, a bird, and a human arm. Bert Hobson immediately called the police, who retrieved the arm. It bore a distinctive tattoo of 2 boxers fighting on the inside of the forearm. The shark was subsequently killed, and its stomach was cut open to search for any other remains, but none were found. Utilizing new fingerprint technology, the police were able to identify the arm's owner as 45-year-old Jimmy Smith, who had been missing since April 7, 1935. Early investigations into Smith's disappearance and shark consumption led police to a Sydney businessman named Reginald William Lloyd Holmes. Holmes was a smuggler who also ran a successful family boat-building business at Lavender Bay, New South Wales. Holmes had employed Smith several times to work insurance scams, including one in 1934 in which an over-insured pleasure cruiser named Pathfinder was sunk. Shortly afterward, the pair began a partnership with Patrick Francis Brady, an ex-serviceman and convicted forger. With signatures from Holmes's friends and clients provided by the boat tycoon, Brady would forge checks for small amounts against their bank accounts, which he and Smith then cashed. Police were later able to figure out that Smith had been blackmailing Holmes. Smith was last seen drinking and playing cards with Patrick Francis Brady at the Cecil Hotel in southern Sydney after telling his wife he was going fishing. Brady had rented a small cottage at the time Smith went missing. Police alleged that Smith was murdered at this cottage. Port Hacking and Gunnamatta Bay were searched by the Australian Navy and the Air Force, but the rest of Smith's body was never found. And this brings our video to a close. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. It really helps a lot. I'll see you in the next episode. Goodbye for now.